What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out. All of the games this weekend across Europe were overshadowed by two major managerial announcements. That is what I am focusing on today, starting, of course, with Jurgen Klopp's announcement that he will be leaving Liverpool at the end of the season. This was coming. It was a question of when, not if, he was going to leave. And it was originally the summer of 2024. He kind of made it sound like he was going to see out his contract, and that was going to be that, and then he was going to take his break. And then he signed the next contract, and then it kind of looked like maybe and based on what he said, he clearly believed, or at least this is what he is saying, is that he thought he had the energy to go to 2026. That's why he signed the new contract, and then decided he does not, in fact, have the energy to go to 2026, and so he's going to leave in the summer of 2024, as was originally expected. But the surprising turn of events leading to that contract extension, and then the surprising turn of events that basically made that contract extension irrelevant, have put Liverpool in a really difficult position in terms of defining where they are long term. And Klopp's resume speaks for itself. His contributions to that club speak for themselves. So I want to focus on the implications of this and what it means moving forward. Because think about this for a second. Once Liverpool is done with this season, honoring Klopp, making run another Premier League title, all of the things that they very much still have in front of them this season, they will need to identify a new sporting director, a new manager to replace one of the greatest in the world and also one of the more important ones in Liverpool history. The person who was supposed to be Klopp's successor by 2026, hypothetically, is in Saudi Arabia, and his stock just continues to fall because the farther away Aston Villa got from Steven Gerrard, the better they've been under Unai Emery. He's not getting this job. So it looked like there was this plan in place for a short amount of time, and that just went by the wayside. So you've got the big Klopp question now. Saudi Arabia is going to come back in and going to bid again for Mo Salah. You're going to have to figure out if you can keep him, what you do if you sell him, all of these big questions. And oh, by the way, there's this Kylian Mbappe thing hanging over everybody at this moment too. Then you have the contracts. Salah, Van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Hypothetically, you have to make decisions on all three of them this summer because they are all expiring in the summer of 2025. And so if you don't want to lose them for free, something needs to happen this summer. And on top of all of that, if you want to say, okay, Steven Gerrard's clearly not the guy, but there has been somebody else who has emerged with the work Xavi Alonso is doing at Bayer Leverkusen. Sure. And this also applies to Roberto De Zerbi, by the way. Kind of the natural people you would think of for this job. Stylistically, are so different than Klopp in the terms of the way their teams play and what they are trying to do, that you are going to have to, if you hire Xabi Alonso or hire Roberto De Zerbi, you have to completely redefine your style of play. And one of the challenges with that, with Klopp's team in particular, is that he looks for very specific types of players, particularly in midfield. And now this has started to evolve a little bit, so maybe you're not as lost as you might have been in the past. But this is not a midfield full of technically gifted players who are going to break down teams the way Roberto De Zerbi and Xabi Alonso want to. This is a team that is built to play in chaos, to play in transition, to use turnovers as their number 10, to do everything the opposite of Pep Guardiola. And so you can't just necessarily take this group of players, as great as it is, and just hand them to Roberto De Zerbi, although Alexis McAllister obviously played for him, and just say, here you go, and just think it's going to be this easy transition. All of that to say, there were going to be questions even before Klopp made this decision. And a lot of uncertainty about where this goes from here. But now the one sort of stabilizing force in all of this that you thought, okay, if they need to regroup, they got to enter into this new post-Sadio Mane, post-Roberto Firmino era, but Klopp is still there to be the focal point of it, to have the energy to kind of get another group to go again, to rebuild this, to get Liverpool to bounce back after last season. I've talked about this consistently in Liverpool's seasons where they've struggled. One of the things Klopp is great at is that team simply never quits on him. He has instilled this incredible belief in them, which is why I wasn't too concerned about last season. They always find a way to bounce back. Obviously, they are bouncing back in a really big way this season, so that's not necessarily the challenge facing the next manager. But there are so many things about Klopp that fit. The better way to put it is Liverpool have taken on Klopp's identity in so many ways that it's a real challenge to have somebody else come in and just assume this is going to keep going. Especially when it's somebody who has not worked with Klopp, right? It certainly doesn't sound like it's going to be one of his assistants or something like that. And so now it was going to be potentially sort of the start of the next era from the standpoint of maybe Mo Salah's gone, that this is maybe kind of the last run for this group of players, and now you're talking about getting into the McAllister, Sobelzai era moving forward, and it was going to be a summer of transition. And now in more ways than one, it seems like you are entering potentially you are entering a new area, obviously from a managerial standpoint. But there's so much else that goes into it as well. And that's really what I wanted to emphasize here, is that this summer is about much more than finding Jurgen Klopp's replacement. It's about figuring out if you want to keep the guys from this core team that are still there, the three of the identifiable sort of people you associate with Liverpool, and Van Dijk, Alexander-Arnold, and Mo Salah. Obviously, you got to find a new manager, and you very well may have to completely redefine the way you play. All of that has to happen at the same time, and the guy who has been the consistent, positive, encouraging voice, the stabilizer, the person who turned this Liverpool juggernaut into what it is today, is not going to be there to oversee this. That's a lot of pressure on everybody else to see if you can keep this rolling as the team that has come closest to challenging Manchester City over these past 5 or so years. The second announcement is that Xavi is leaving Barcelona at the end of this season. It comes after a embarrassing, humiliating defeat where Barcelona come back and throw the game away right after they get eliminated from the Copa del Rey. Obviously, it's been a really poor season. And I talked about this after the Supercopa, that was your opportunity to go make sure you leave with a trophy, that you've got a Clasico win. You beat Real Madrid to get a trophy. That Clasico was not just in the league where you're going to finish behind them anyway. And so now you're trying to just make sure this doesn't turn into a catastrophe. And by catastrophe, I mean not qualifying for Champions League and not winning a trophy. Trophy is pretty much out the window unless they do something miraculous in the Champions League at this point, because you're also out of the Copa del Rey. But the really sad part about this for me, And just reading some of Xavi's comments, the the amount of pain he is in is just, you feel for him. And he was pretty consistent about, if I don't feel like I can do the job, I'm stepping down, because I'm not going to sit here and be part of what is preventing Barcelona from being where they should be. And to his credit, that's exactly what he did. However, I wonder how this would have gone had Barcelona, and I mentioned this after the Copa del Rey game too, but it's pertinent to Xavi specifically, so I want to bring it up again. What would have happened if, when all of these financial levers started getting pulled and all of this bankruptcy stuff and not having any money and all of that started going down, that Barcelona actually, whether it's publicly or privately, but the leadership at the top of the club came together and said, you know what? We need to accept this situation and adjust our expectations accordingly. We need to understand that we just might not be in a position to compete for La Liga titles right now, that we may just be the third or fourth best team in Spain with what Atletico Madrid are doing. Obviously, you've got Real Madrid. And just tried to lower expectations. Because it's a strange collection of players. It's not necessarily the guys you would expect to end up at Barcelona. You got Robert Lewandowski, but he's really struggled this season. He's not the player he once was. List goes on and on. Instead, you never really got the sense that anybody was trying to lower the expectations. And then Xavi goes and wins La Liga last season. And I kept harping on this. The Real Madrid was getting so much praise, and nobody really seemed to believe that Barcelona team was really all that good. And those two things cannot simultaneously exist. Because it was a 10-point gap, I believe. It's not like it was close. So either that Barcelona team was way better than people give it credit for, or that Real Madrid team was nowhere near as good as it should have been, or if you want to say it's a little bit of both, basically Xavi pulled off some kind of miracle. And so now you go, well, he won the league, so what happened this season? He is a victim of his own success. Because nobody wanted to have patience. And in normal circumstances, that's understandable because this is Barcelona. These are not normal circumstances. Xavi also had managed for what? 2 years, something like that? In a league nobody pays attention to. Of course, everybody always assumed this was in his future and that he was going to be the guy at some point. I keep harping on this point too with different people. If you're going to hire that kind of manager and you're Barcelona, you've got to give him a learning curve. You have to accept that there are going to be bumps along the way. And I say that to acknowledge that it's not like Xavi has been perfect, because I'm really going to bat for him, because to me, the fact that he is leaving says way more about Barcelona and the lack of stability there than it does about him and him as a manager. I don't hold this against him really at all. Sure, he could have done a better job. If you give him another 5 years, he probably is a better manager. But he looked at it and he kind of said, I mean, one, there's probably just this idea of we're not where we need to be, and if I can't do it, then I'm going to step aside to give somebody else a chance. But also, he kept talking about the pressure and what the media, coming after him, and he said, if we don't win titles, and it's not that he's wrong in saying all of that in a vacuum. But the sad part of this story for me is that Barcelona took the anointed heir, the guy that everybody went, he's the next one. He's the one to restore this club. And he came in, he immediately made them better. Then he went and won a La Liga title they had no business winning. and was still getting hammered. These are circumstances outside of his control. I don't know what else he was supposed to do. And so to circle back to the original point, had Barcelona hired him and said, look, obviously, we all feel great about this. He knows this club inside and out. We got to give him time, though. We're not putting him in a position to be successful. And then let the growth happen. Really leaned into the academy. Been okay as long as you finish in Champions League spots, win a trophy here or there, win a Supercopa, win a Copa del Rey, and just get back into the knockout stage of the Champions League, which, by the way, he did, and slowly actually get this organized financially and take some accountability for all of the horrible decisions that have led to this point, none of which have anything to do with the managers. Instead, they just kept saying, no, this is business as normal. We're just going to keep going, keep going. Xavi does a phenomenal job. And then eventually it is unsustainable. And as soon as it gets unsustainable and kind of all the pressure starts caving in, it starts caving in on him in particular, to a certain extent at least. Obviously, there's a lot of frustration with the board as well. And it was Xavi's choice to step away. Let's be honest, though. What were the chances he was going to be Barcelona's manager next season anyway? There's a real argument, and maybe it is even the most likely scenario most people agree with, that he saw the writing on the wall and decided to get out early and to say, I'm not even going to try. I'm done with this. I did what I could. It's not working. I'm out. That's the way you want to handle the guy for your club. We still don't even know if he is a average, maybe he's a bad manager. I don't think so. Average manager, good manager, great manager. We don't know. Because he wasn't given the time. And by the way, this is going to end poorly. But overall, look at what he did and where that club was when he took it over. I've never really understood all of the criticism coming his way. Of course it's not good enough because it's Barcelona. That is not his fault, and that is not the Barcelona he is managing. And there just seems to be no widespread acceptance of that within the club and the people who are making these decisions. And so now you got to go find another manager, and you're just continuing to dig yourself farther into this hole and continue to pull levers and do all of these things instead of actually addressing the problem and finding somebody who you could rebuild with and actually get this club headed on the right track. And now that person who seemed to be the obvious choice for the long-term future of this club to get it back where it's supposed to be is leaving at the end of the season. And Barcelona just aren't anywhere closer to solving the real issues. That was a lot. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.